to our third event of the semester for our Student Equity Speaker Series. My name is James Knoll, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Dean of English and Equity Pedagogy and co-chair the Student Equity Work Group, along with Dr. Sangha Nyogi. Yeah. Sociology. Each year, the Student Equity Work Group chooses a theme for our speaker series. In the past, we've had themes such as undoing injustice, rise by lifting, indigeneity, and cultivating critical hope. This year, our theme is health justice, reimagining health and wellness. Health justice means organizing from the ground up, social change that transforms the current systems of neglect, bias, and privilege into systems, policies, practices, institutions that truly support healthy communities for all. While access to quality healthcare is crucial, health justice involves many more dimensions than the availability and distribution of healthcare. This session is being recorded, and even though we're in a virtual space, we must acknowledge that Diablo Valley College is situated on the ancestral lands of the Bay Miwok people. We name the history of this beloved place as a gesture of respect and reparation towards the indigenous residents of the colonized land we now call home. We acknowledge the profound suffering caused by the theft and colonization of this land and grieve the ongoing systematic harm to Miwok culture, as well as to all the indigenous cultures of what we now call North America. We honor the Bay Miwok as the ancestral stewards of this land and are actively working to build the right relationship. Before handing over the program, a reminder to please fill out our survey at the end of the event. We will post the Teeny URL for easy access, and that should be done, I think, at the end of the session. If you would like to watch last year's session or early events, you can find the recordings on our webpage. I now invite the amazing Christina Gomez, who is a tri-chair of the Dreamers Alliance, to introduce our brilliant speaker today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, James. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Christina Gomez. My pronouns are she, her. For this event, in alignment with Women's History Month, and as a woman of color, a Latina, and as a fellow community college transfer student and first-generation student, it is such an honor to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Patricia Zavella completed her PhD in anthropology at the University of California, Berkeley. She's a professor emerita of Latin American and Latino Studies at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She works in the intersection of Chicanx, Latinx studies, anthropology, and feminist studies, and on issues related to poverty, family, sexuality, health, work, transnational migration, and women's social activism. Her most recent book is The Movement for Reproductive Justice, Empowering Women of Color Through Social Activism. Dr. Zavella is the recipient of the American Anthropological Association's Committee on Gender Equity in Anthropology Award and the Association of Latina and Latino Anthropologists Distinguished Career Award, and the National Association for Chicana and Chicano Studies NAC Scholar of the Year Award. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Zavella.
Thank you so much for this invitation. It's a real honor and pleasure to be here, in part because I've heard so much about DVC and about Puente in particular, and I keep saying, I really wish I had been part of Puente back in the day, but also because my son, Anthony Zavella Gonzalez, teaches here, and he is amazing. Okay, I have a lot of material to go through. I'm going to save time at the end for your questions, but if you don't understand something, then feel free to ask me to clarify. And just a word of caution, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was age 33, which was many years ago. And one of the symptoms is extreme sensitivity to temperature. So as I lecture, I get warmed up. So I will be fanning myself. So it's not any concern, but that's what's going on. Okay, from self-care to healing justice. These are things I have learned from women of color social activists. And so this is the cover of my book, a picture of women organizing. And what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the movement for reproductive justice. And then I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about healing and wellness and what I learned from them, and then leave time for questions and hopefully some discussion. And I want to begin by giving you the definition of reproductive justice. So we all know about reproductive rights and the way in which they're under attack in this country. But the movement for reproductive justice has been around since the 1990s, actually maybe even before that. And they see their mission as the human right to have children. That is, that we should not be subject to sterilization abuse and the way in which women of color are put down for having too many children or children at a young age. We should have the human right to not have children. So if a woman decides or a pregnant person decides they want to terminate their pregnancy, they should have access to those services and not be judged for it. That we should have the human right to raise our children in safe and healthy environments, which means that we are free from reproductive oppression, but other kinds of inequalities. And we have the right to bodily autonomy, that is to decide ourselves how we're going to use our bodies, love our bodies, and to choose our gender identity. And as you can see from this image, I sort of think this is sort of like a Tibetan prayer wheel. The movement sees itself as constantly pivoting and being in coalition with other social movements. So environmental justice, queer rights, educational justice, workers' rights, ending violence against women, immigrant rights, youth organizing, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things you hear often in the movement for reproductive justice is this is an RJ issue. And so over time, depending on where you're at, local issues will come up, or they'll be organizing around national issues. And I studied this social movement for 5 years, between 2013 and 2018. I did participant observation, I did interviews and focus groups, and I also looked at their social media and the position papers that they release. So I always felt like I had all this information going on. It was really kind of challenging to try to figure out what's this organization doing? What are they doing over there? But in the end, I was able to pull it together. There are over 30 reproductive justice organizations in the country and one in Canada. And since I wrote my book, I read that there were 3 new organizations that have happened. So it's a very dynamic movement. And one of the things that concerned me is I always felt like, why haven't I heard about this movement? Well, I think in part because the national media pays attention to more mainstream feminist organizations, and often these RJ organizations are working in local contexts. Well, we hope to change that. So the movement very much sees itself as being framed by using the term intersectionality. Now that's a term that gets thrown around a lot in higher education, in scholarship, and in social activism. So I just want to give a friendly reminder. I'm sure this is probably familiar to you. What do we mean by intersectionality? Well, really, it's all about systems of power related to racialization. We're all racialized in one way or another, whether we're white or Latinx or African American. It's related to classism. We all have a class experience, and sometimes that changes. I grew up very poor. I'm the oldest of 12 children, and yet over time I got an education. I became a professor. I graduated, if you will, to the middle class. But I always feel like I have a working class mentality about things. Sexism, we're all involved in a system of gender inequality. that very much shapes our everyday lives. Things like women in general make less than men do. And if you look at particular categories of women, Latinas make even less than white women. So these are inequalities that are ongoing. Heteronormativity, we are all able to claim a sexual identity, and yet we live in a society that very much is homophobic. And so you have proposing legislation that discriminates against queers, proposing legislation in Florida, or actually passing legislation that's all about don't say gay. So these are some major forms of inequality. There are others, of course. We could talk about legal status, the way in which you're undocumented in our society, that very much disempowers you. We could talk about age, the way in which young people don't have the same political rights, the right to vote, for example, that adults do. Ableism, we live in a society that's very ableist. I was actually really happy to see a young person in a wheelchair on this campus. On my campus, that doesn't happen because it's not designed to be accessible to the otherly able. So there are intersecting systems of power, and we all are located within them. One of the things I used to do when I taught intersectionality was have everyone talk about their social location. And it was a real revelation to young white men. They were like, oh, I thought intersectionality was for women of color, but it includes all of us. Just a friendly reminder. Okay, so intersectionality, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but here's this white guy saying, nah, I don't see it, because he has the privilege not to have to think about it. And these pillars under the table are people of color. And so this Lalo Alcaraz is trying to convey the way in which some people have privilege under a system of intersectionality, and many of us struggle with being disempowered. And there are lots of things that are useful about intersectionality. It very much seeks an alternative knowledge in relation to marginalized people. That is, we all have examples of knowledge systems that are not taken seriously. Our grandmothers, for example, I'll never forget the time my first child had colic, and I mentioned to my mother-in-law, and she said, well, give her té de manzanilla, chamomile tea with a little bit of honey. And I went to my doctor, is this okay? I don't want to hurt her. And he said, oh, it won't hurt her, just a little bit of honey. I gave it to her, it was like magic. She stopped crying immediately. There's a system of knowledge there that's all about healing that doesn't get validated. We pay attention to institutionalized forms of knowledge. So intersectionality is always paying attention to what are other systems of knowledge? Why are they being repressed? How can we learn from them? Intersectionality also accounts for multiple identities and complex subjectivity. That is, we all have many identities. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a former professor, I'm a feminist, I'm an activist. All of these things are important. And my subjectivity is all about my values, who I am in the world, what my politics are about, what's important to me. And we all develop our own subjectivity in relation to what's going on in society. Intersectionality is a resistant imaginary. That is, it very much says, instead of the power that be, how can we think about new social worlds? How can we think about freedom and liberation for everyone? And then intersectionality explores coalitional politics grounded in solidarity. So instead of saying, like the Chicano movement did when I was entering college, we're all the same and we're all from Mexico and we all speak Spanish. And I was like, my family's from Southern Colorado. We've been here 5 generations. My mother didn't teach us Spanish because she didn't want me to be, subject to the racism that she experienced. Instead of that kind of, we're all one thing, intersectionality says, we're actually really different from one another, even if we're all from the same racial category. So what are those differences and where do they come from? And how can we find common cause and celebrate our difference? The movement for reproductive justice also uses the framework of human rights. And what's really helpful about this framework is that it offers a structural perspective on social problems. So you all have probably heard the way in which poor people are put down. What's wrong with them? Why don't they work hard? Why don't they get an education? Why don't they stop being lazy? Human rights says, no, there's something going on here that creates poverty. People are struggling to get out of it. And a human rights perspective asks us to be compassionate for those who are victims of human rights abuses. And this social movement particularly wants us to have the human right to access healthcare with dignity. And of course, this is a big issue because in lots of states, poor people cannot access healthcare, even if they have health insurance. One of the things I learned in South Texas is the copays were so high that people couldn't afford literally to go to the doctor. We live in California where increasingly we're passing legislation so that all undocumented people have access to healthcare. That is very unusual. There are plenty of states where poor people and undocumented people do not have the right to access healthcare. So this movement believes we have the human right to access healthcare with dignity. It's also a social movement that tries to inform the public. This is what's going on in different places around the country so that we can see films, read poems, read reports, sort of try to understand what's going on and the way in which people are struggling to access full human rights with dignity. This framework also links social activists in the United States with activists around the world. And in particular, some of the activists in the movement for reproductive justice have been invited to Geneva to testify before the United Nations about the way in which people don't have access to healthcare. And when my friend Lucy Ceballos Felix testified, she said, it was complete silence and everyone was saying, this happens in the United States, the land of freedom. They were shocked because we actually don't have good access to healthcare in this country. And then this movement advocates a decolonial view of human rights. It's not just about making the state accountable and providing access to healthcare and ending poverty and making conditions so that we can live healthy lives. It's about changing what we think about human rights so that we are paying attention to the cultures of different peoples in our communities, the languages that they speak, their different ways of thinking about health. We're honoring all of that. And so this movement really sort of asks us to shift gears and think very broadly and very fully. So the reproductive justice movement really sort of engages in three sets of strategies. The first is base building, that is grassroots organizing. Literally, these activists will go into communities of color, low-income communities. They'll invite people to join their activities, and they will have different kinds of workshops and trainings to teach people about the reproductive justice movement and about other kinds of events going on in their communities and in the nation. And so one of the things they aim to do is have this long-term perspective on social transformation. Let's get people organized, help them think about how their individual struggles take place in relation to broader structural inequalities, and then figure out what are we going to try to do to change those conditions. At the same time that they're doing that, they're involved in culture shift work. And what this means is they're taking on all of the negative stereotypes and representations about people of color, and they're saying, no, that's not true. We're not welfare queens. We're not people who are here to game the system or come and have anchor babies so that we can get citizenship. We are all about coming from communities with strength and resiliency despite generational trauma that's happened in our communities. And so the movement is constantly sending out messages that honor the strength and resiliency of our communities, and specifically taking on particular kinds of messages that are said about different groups of women. And then finally, they engage in policy advocacy. And that means that at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, and the international level, they're trying to push for legislation and implementation of policies that will lead to social justice. So I'm going to give you some examples of all of these strategies. So this is culture shift work as organized by the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Justice. And I should mention, I'm on the board of the National Latina Institute, and I'm on the board of California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. So now that I finished my book, I got invited and I get to see the inside of the movement, and it's been really great. So the National Latina Institute did this large survey, and they were trying to understand how do Latinxs think about abortion. And we had all of these stereotypes. Well, you know, the majority of us are Catholic, the church is against abortion. You know, what do people really think? And they had, you know, hundreds of people answer the survey, and it was in English and in Spanish. And one of the things they found is that overwhelmingly, like 70% of Latinx support women's access to abortion services. Big surprise. And even higher percentages said, well, if someone I know got an abortion, I would try to support that person. And so the National Latina Institute noticed that there were some of the people who answered the survey who were like really strong and pro, you know, women and very active and involved, and they called them las poderosas, the powerful women. And so National Latina Institute organized this campaign, Soy Poderosa and My Voice Matters. I am a strong woman and my voice matters. And they had it online, and they invited all of their allies to post a picture that says, Soy Poderosa because, and so you hear someone say, because my voice, I use my voice for reproductive justice, because I'm a feminist, because I value human rights. And one of the things I think is interesting about this is if you look at these pictures, is this person white? Is she Latina? Is she Iranian? Not quite sure. And so it asks us to, it invites reflection, like, who is this supporter? This person, does he identify, he looks like a guy to me, does he identify as a feminist? Does he identify as feminine? He's supporting this. This woman in the corner, is she Afro-Latina? Is she African-American? Is she from Africa? We don't know. But by looking at these images, we think about, I am a powerful woman, and the way in which lots of different kinds of people are supporting that idea. This is an image taken at a leadership institute that I was at. I'm there in the back. And one of the things they're doing here is they're saying, we are poderosas, using the gender neutral term. And so these are women from colonias, low income, Spanish speaking, many undocumented, living in very poor neighborhoods where sometimes there's no paved streets or there's no running water. These women are being trained how to become powerful women. And here you can see them, they're embracing this identity. We are powerful. So one example of culture shift work. This is an example of base building, organizing in the colonias near the US-Mexico border. So on the left, it's a little bit hard to see, but this is Lucy Ceballos Felix, teaching a workshop, a leadership workshop. It was 2 days. I had the opportunity to observe it. I deliberately took a picture from the back because some of these women are undocumented, but you can see there are some señoras grandes, some elders who are white-haired, and some are very young. And in the back of her are these 2 trees. And one of our breakout groups was to begin to think about what are the health problems that we see in our communities. And then we learned, well, there's a lot of diabetes and obesity. Where does that come from? Well, it's not just that people are overeating. It's actually something more profound. It's because people are too poor to buy quality food. It's because people have jobs that don't pay very well. It's because people are struggling just to put food on the table. And so the roots of the trees are talking about capitalism and patriarchy and heteronormativity, and the way in which those lead to the health problems that we see in our communities. And so at the end of this 2-day leadership workshop, the women came out feeling like, okay, I'm a powerful woman. I know where the health issues are coming from. What can we do to change those conditions? And this picture, was actually cropped for the cover of my book. Lucy is doing a press release, and one of the women has a sign that says, I want to live happy without fear. They were protesting immigration and the way in which so many people were being deported and afraid and detained and families separated. And they're arguing, no, we need to have a border that's all about welcoming immigrants, giving them the right to asylum if that's what they're seeking, honoring their struggles to get here and work in our country. Policy advocacy. These are examples of the way in which this movement works to try to either bring about better policies or show how we need to have better policies. So the image in the upper left-hand quarter was a human rights hearing held in South Texas. And they brought local activists to come and hear the hearings, including a state legislator, but it was also projected around the country. And they had here in the middle, 17 women who were part of this group had written their stories about when Texas passed all of that repressive legislation that shut down a bunch of the clinics, which meant it was incredibly hard not only to access abortion services, but to access any kind of reproductive health services. These women talked about a friend who got diagnosed with ovarian cancer and she couldn't afford to go to the clinic and pay full cost and she got diagnosed too late. Or a woman whose daughter had discharged from her breasts and she was too young for any kind of program for low-income families. So they had to wait until she got older before she could access health services. All of these stories were heartbreaking. One woman talked about she was a student, she got pregnant, she decided to terminate the pregnancy, her partner supported her. They had to drive hours to go to a clinic that was actually open and offered abortion services. She had to have an ultrasound and a sonogram. And she said the staff were basically trying to talk me out of this, even though this was something me and my partner agreed was something we should do. So all kinds of really heartbreaking stories about Texas legislation. This image was taken in Washington, D.C. The Movement for Reproductive Justice organized 100 activists to come to D.C. They had a demonstration. Here they are sitting on the ground about to be arrested. And many of these women were undocumented. And they were basically calling for comprehensive immigration reform with the right to access healthcare. Of course, we haven't got there yet. We still need to get comprehensive immigration reform, but this was something that they very much have been struggling on behalf of. This lower image is youth from Forward Together who had done all of this amazing work doing surveys in Oakland public schools, trying to understand what does comprehensive sex education mean in Oakland public schools. And it turned out it was all over the map. Some kids were getting abstinence-only education, some kids were getting better quality, but it was very uneven. And young people didn't know, where do you go to get contraception or to get condoms? What happens if you get a sexually transmitted disease? And so these young people went to Congress and they were lobbying, we need more money to fund comprehensive sex education so that we have good teaching modules and so that the teachers can train young people. And so we have centers on campus where people can go and pick up free condoms or get referred to local clinics. And then this image here was a campaign run. There was an attempt to ban abortions in the city of Albuquerque, just within the city limits, after 20 weeks. And reproductive justice organizers band together and they developed a campaign called Respect ABQ Women. This was the press conference that they had. And basically they said, we don't want outsiders coming in and trying to tell us what kind of services should be offered in Albuquerque. And Albuquerque is really the center for the entire state of New Mexico. That's changing. But for now, that was where people would go to get abortion services. And they defeated it. They got out the vote. They did door-to-door canvassing. They offered a message that, we know how to take care of ourselves. And if someone needs an abortion, they should have that right. And they stopped that attempted municipal ban on abortion. So different examples of policy advocacy. So this is a movement that has all kinds of ideas and different campaigns, depending on where you are in the country, that is all about how do we sort of structural changes that would facilitate health and well-being. So jobs with living wages and benefits that would enable debt-free lives. What a concept, that where you could have enough money that you could pay for healthcare. Or grocery stores and farmers markets so that you could buy nutritious foods. Those of us who live in California, we have the privilege of buying organic produce grown nearby. For a lot of people, there are food deserts, and the food that they can buy in the stores are really bad. They advocate for parks and open space where it's safe to exercise. And we see time and again when there are exercise routes near low-income communities, people use them. They walk, they run, they get out more, they get some exercise and sunshine, and they're healthier. They advocate for systems that allow clean drinking water. We've seen in places like Flint, where people can't drink the water that comes out of their taps. reproductive justice, argues that we need to have clean drinking water for everyone. They advocate for good educational systems where students learn to question inequality and discover remedies and find their passions. They argue we have the human right to quality education. They advocate for good healthcare systems that are accessible to all. So if you live in a community where there are recent immigrants and they speak a different language, you need to figure out how to translate services for them so that people will be able to talk about their health issues and to provide culturally sensitive healthcare systems. And they want protection of the land, mountains, rivers, forests, and using sustainable agriculture and food sovereignty. So this is a movement where many people very much believe that we can't just pay attention to people. We need to have healthy environments. And that means that whatever food systems we have can't be dumping chemicals into our rivers or paving over mountains or being disrespectful to Mother Nature. Okay, so these are really great policy ideas and they're trying to implement them in different places. However, I want to sort of dig a little deeper and talk about what is health and wellness? What do we mean by that? And here is where I feel like I really learned a lot from the movement for reproductive justice. So one definition that they strive for is offered by the World Health Organization, and it says health and wellness is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And it's supported by public health, sanitation, occupational environmental conditions, education, nutrition, and non-discriminatory medical treatment. And one of the things that I think is really helpful about this is that it points to institutions. It points to things the government is doing or can be doing better. It's really sort of suggesting we need to have public health, and we just come through a pandemic or coming toward the end of a pandemic where the public health system, if it had been mobilized earlier, would have saved even more hundreds of thousands of lives. And yes, it's a hassle, but that's what it was designed to do. And so the World Health Organization is really saying different countries should be setting up these institutions so that people can develop health and wellness. So the movement for reproductive justice very much believes that and supports that, but they go one step further. And many of them really subscribe to indigenous notions of well-being. So this is an idea that comes from the indigenous notion of balance and harmony. That is, when the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual are in balance and harmony, supported by healing from historical trauma, using native language, culture and ceremony, and cosmovision, that is our religious worldview, that when you are able to use those and bring into balance the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, that's when you have well-being. And I think this is a very powerful way to think about well-being because all of us have physical or emotional or occasional spiritual challenges. And so it's really suggesting that what can you do to bring all of this into balance? And so Native American activists in particular very much support that individuals should go through cleanses, maybe burning some sage, maybe meditation, maybe chanting. You know, what can you do to bring yourself into balance? But the movement for reproductive justice goes one step further. And I'll get to that in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about individual self-care. I think particularly during lockdown, when we were all at home and everything seemed overwhelming and we were like cleaning our groceries and, you know, staying away from people, I was kind of freaking out. You know, many of us felt like we really sort of wanted to run and hide and not think about it. But in fact, what we see from scientific research and other research is there are lots of things that we can do to take care of ourselves. And you all are probably familiar with these. You can unplug from your devices and from social media. I've been trying to stay away from Facebook myself. I know it's addicting, but that's something that we can sort of do just to sort of give yourself a break and take a breath and think about other things in your life. You can move, get out and get some exercise, get in the sunshine, get some vitamin D and some fresh air. Very, very healthy thing to do. Develop good habits. We all know this. We shouldn't smoke, keep your sleep well, eat less. It turns out, you know, particularly as you age, if you don't have those big meals, it's that you're actually healthier. Keep hydrated. You know, don't drink alcohol too much. We should have healthy nutrition. So we all have our shortcomings. I have a sweet tooth that I try to stay away from, but, you know, don't indulge too much. Have a healing ceremony occasionally. So sometimes, you know, people go to a curandero or to a local healer. Maybe you burn sage in your home. Maybe you light a candle, say a prayer, you know, whatever you need to sort of clear your mind. I like to write in a journal, you know, sort of taking care of yourself. And then nurture your passions. What are the things that get you excited? What are the things that make you happy? True confession, I'm a yoga practitioner. I've practiced yoga for 23 years now, saved my life. It's prevented back problems. But I like to bake. There's something about baking that just, I don't know, it makes me feel good. And so even though I try not to eat so much of what I bake, I try to give it away if I can. But that's something that makes me really happy. You all have your passions, music, dance, exercise, whatever it is. Okay, but in addition to individual self-care, the Movement for Reproductive Justice advocates that we practice healing justice. And by healing justice, what they mean is non-religious spiritual activism. So I know many of us are raised with a religious heritage. My family was deeply Catholic, very, very religious. We spent plenty of time on our knees praying the rosary and going to mass every Sunday and giving money to the church, even though we were poor. And it was so ingrained that whenever I would visit my grandmother and she wanted to go to church, well, of course, we're all going to church. I mean, there was just no question about it. But this is something different. Let's get away from organized religion and think about spiritual activism as a passion for practicing spirituality that may be connected to religions, but may not necessarily. And so healing justice is a framework that responds to and intervenes in generational trauma and violence and brings collective practices that transform the consequences of oppression on our bodies, hearts, and minds. That is, it really is a different way of thinking. It suggests that we need to pay attention to not just what the church tells us, whatever your church is, but really sort of what are the emotional and the spiritual traumas that we've experienced because of racism or because of sexism or because of settler colonialism. So healing justice asks us to cultivate the conditions that might allow us to feel more whole and connected to ourselves, to the world around us, particularly Mother Nature, and to other human beings. And so healing justice suggests that when you're in community, that when you have a good ability to interact with Mother Nature, that is a way, and when you live lives in which you're not always struggling to survive, that's a shift towards healing justice. So one of the activists that I interviewed, she was talking about this, and she said one of the things she's learned about the movement for reproductive justice is that it's critical to come within yourself and really find your own place in this work. And one of the things she was getting at is that the movement for reproductive justice really honors a journey of activism. It really understands that most of us don't start off fully woke and, you know, all ready to roll, that most of us really sort of begin with questioning things and trying to understand and reflect and put things together. And so she's asking us to really find who we are as individuals. And so that begins with a process of self-discovery. And I always say college is a great place to figure out who you are. This is a time for you to learn things, absolutely, and learn how to do things, how to write. But it's also a time for you to figure out who are you. And in many ways, think about like your family's value systems. Again, raised very, very traditionally Catholic, it took me a while to realize, yeah, I value some of Catholicism, the social justice part, the help your neighbor, go visit the sick, feed the poor, all of those kinds of values I very much honor, but I can't support the church entirely, particularly after I started reading history and heard about the conquest and colonialism and what the church continues to do in some of our communities. So pulling out the values that are important to you. It's also about self-interrogation. Who are you and who do you want to be? And here, again, college is a great time because you get to figure out what's your path. Do you want to be a teacher or a lawyer or music producer, whatever it is? How do you want to work? Who are your role models? What excites you? Where's your path? And sometimes we have multiple paths. How are you going to get there? And then it's also a process of self-assertion. How do you want to work in the world? Do you want to be the lawyer who works for corporations and makes a lot of money? Or do you want to be a lawyer who works for people and help them, have better lives? How do you express your values and find community? What is your process of figuring out who you are and what you want to do in the world? I think this is a really important process, and it's something that the Movement for Reproductive Justice very much engages in. So they invite women to come in, to tell their stories, to talk with one another, to hear that they're not alone, that other women have similar struggles, to write about it, to draw, to testify. And in the process, you begin to incorporate the reproductive justice framework, but also hold your own values and what is important to you. So I'm going to give you two examples. In my book, I have a whole chapter on From Self-Care to Healing Justice. And if anyone wants to read my book, I will send you a PDF of it. I would really love for you to read it. Okay, send me an email. So there are four examples in the book. I don't have time to talk about all of them, but I'm going to talk about two of them. And so one is organized by Tewa Women United, located in northern New Mexico in the Tewa Pueblo, of which I think there are 12 pueblos in northern New Mexico. And so it brings women from all of these pueblos. And they started off, women meeting in people's homes, telling their stories. People had gone through trauma, alcoholism, or someone lost a family member, domestic violence, sexual abuse. And they began to remember the teachings of their ancestors. And one of the things in Tewa religion is that the feminine is sacred and that women give birth. That is considered to be something very divine. And so they were like, how have we come to this place where women are not treated well, and yet our religion values the feminine and the divine? How can we get back to the values that are important to us? And so they've done they've been active for years. They've done a number of projects. They work with young people. They train doulas to help women birth and to bring in their spiritual values while giving birth. They have a very strong environmental justice program going on. But one of the things they do is what they call the Healing Rocks ceremony. And this was something that came to one of the elders in a dream. And from her point of view, that's her epistemology. That dream is something that teaches you something. You need to pay attention to it. It's knowledge and guidance from the ancestors. And the dream said, under your bed is a bag with rocks, and you need to pull out that bag and use it to teach our young people about what has been happening to Native peoples. And so she designed this ceremony where they talk about each generation's sense contact with white people who came to colonize and settle the United States. So in the first generation, there were 3 rocks that symbolize conquest and genocide and violence and extermination and the way in which people were forcefully moved and the kind of trauma that people experienced and the way in which they were told, don't cry in public, or, we'll get in trouble and just hold it in. And they also put in seeds that recognize, despite all of that violence and trauma, people have been growing and, practicing our religion and doing things that keep our communities together. The next generation experienced a different kind of trauma. Maybe they were sent to Indian schools, or maybe they were punished for speaking native languages, or maybe they were forced to assimilate and not wear indigenous clothing. So that each generation had a series of traumas, and each generation, they put 3 more rocks into the bag and 3 more seeds. So by the time it gets down to the 7th generation, the bag has thousands of rocks. It's really heavy, but there are also thousands of seeds. And so this is a ceremony designed to be towards junior high school children. So the children are taught a history that they never get in their schools. They're made to understand, now I get why my great-grandmother was always so quiet and she was crying. Now I get why my uncle drinks so much, because, you know, what happened, he was sent to the Indian school. And so the young people learn things, but it also helps them see that these seeds are coming along and we have survived and we are continuing our culture and our worldview. So, excuse me. So this, she calls it a healing table. It's really an altar. And on here you can see corn, which is sacred to many indigenous peoples. There's water, there's a candle, there's ceramics that's made out of clay and water to remind us of the elements of the earth. There's feathers that remind us of the wind. It's sort of bringing together symbols of things that are very important to Native communities and honoring them. And when you light the candle, they believe that that centers attention. It's a space to be vulnerable. It's a sacred space. And she did this presentation at an academic conference at Mujeres Activas en Letras y Cambio Social. And so here are all of these academic Chicana, Latina, and Native women. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. And so while they're doing this, they're also inviting people who are not Native American, out what they call outsiders. And they're asking all of us to be vulnerable as we hear about each generation and the trauma they experienced and the way in which they continued to survive. And so one of the things they've done is they presented this Healing Rock ceremony in predominantly white communities. And it's a way for white people to begin the healing process of how their ancestors were part of the genocide. It's really a very powerful experience. Very moving. I mean, one of the things that they believe is that because Mother Nature includes our relatives, because the trees and the birds and the mountains and the rivers are literally relatives, that if a young Native American can't quite talk about, oh my God, this is overwhelming, he can go listen to the wind or talk to the birds or commune with nature. And so it's, again, a different epistemology. It's very moving to me. Every time I write about this and think about it, it's moving. I think in part because both of my great-great-grandfathers were born in Taos, New Mexico, which post-conquest, that was sort of an intersection. There were lots of Native peoples who came and the Spanish came. And so likely my great-great-grandfather, who eventually moved to Mora and then Southern Colorado, where my family still lives, he was probably part Native American. My other great-great-grandfather was born on the Taos Pueblo. So he was likely completely indigenous. And yet those are family stories that we've completely forgotten. My family didn't even, until I did this research, didn't even know what kind of Native American ancestry we had. And so part of me feels like, yes, people have survived, but so many of us have lost our heritage. And this is a process of reclaiming our whole selves, our full selves. So a second example is from Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights, or COLOR, which is based in Denver, Colorado. And COLOR has this really amazing set of youth projects, youth empowerment projects, one for 13 to 15-year-olds, for 16 to 18-year-olds, and then to 19 through 21. And so I got to spend a summer in Denver working with COLOR. And one of the things they do with the 13 to 15-year-olds, the Hermanitas program, is they teach them basic anatomy and sexual health. And so, a hot summer day, we were, up on the second floor waiting for this lesson to begin. And they told us, write down all the words you know for genitalia, for penises and vaginas. So like, what are all the slang terms you've heard in your life? So we're all laughing and writing down these words. And they left and they came back in, and the women were wearing these costumes. And it's a little bit hard to tell, but that's supposed to be a vagina and a penis. And one of the things I love about it is these costumes were sewn by one of the women's grandmother for a pride parade. And so we're all laughing, and then they started, putting on the board all the words that we had brainstormed. And, we were like, why are we calling, a penis, a whistle, a pito, or, a pájaro, like, why can't we just say what they are? Well, all of these repressive discourses that many of us have grown up with. And they went on to really sort of teach women about sexism and music lyrics. And in Colorado, there's something called a purity ball, where young girls and their fathers go into this dance, and the girls pledge their purity until marriage. And there's Colorado Springs is really the center of conservatism. So, there's a lot of abstinence-only education. And so these women begin to learn about their bodies. We were all asked to name our vaginas. One woman said she named hers plush owl Spartacus, and we were all like, whoa, that sounds powerful, like, good for you. And so it was a really fun, demystifying learning, but at the same time, really serious education that was going on. And so the picture up above is these young women were taken to a field trip to the Capitol, to Washington, D.C. They met with their local congresswoman who's in that blue jacket. And these women had been telling their stories, what happened in their families, because people didn't know about their bodies and about sexuality. And this woman is telling the story. My 14-year-old cousin got pregnant and she had to get an abortion. Her mom was really upset. And then her sister, who was 15, got pregnant and she couldn't have her quinceañera. And, like, this needs to stop. Like, these women need access to information about their bodies, but they need access to contraception and condoms. And so the congresswoman, she was so impressed with these young women. They told their stories, they made their pitch, they asked for funding for comprehensive sex education in Colorado. And by the end of it, she was promising, I'm going to see what I can do. You all deserve this. And so they really came away feeling empowered. This is the tagline that they were using at the time. I got this, lo tengo bajo control. The organization was very much like, we can do this. We're empowered, we're strong, we can learn about our bodies, we can learn about sexual health and well-being, and we can have fun while we're doing that. And this is one of their Viva la Diva celebrations, where they bring in, a DJ and poets and give presentations, but also dance. And so lots of celebration going on. And so this organization, not only doing amazing work, also does things like they are trying to organize a healthy work culture. So the staff will get chair massages every once in a while. They'll have mental health services, so people can go talk to a therapist. They have mentors, so staff get paired up with somebody in the organization to help them work through all the challenges that they have at their job. And then they do, fun activities like go for a hike together, or go out and have a drink together, or whatever. And so it's all about doing great work, but it's also, let's pay attention to the work culture that we've got going on here and try to make it a place of health and well-being. And as I was learning about this, I was chair of my department, I was thinking, we could really use some of this in my department. There are many places where work is all about, you do your work and then you're out of there. And in fact, they're suggesting there's something deeper that can happen in relation to work sites. And then finally, the final piece is that I learned from these reproductive justice activists is that while you are struggling, you are healing. So many of these women, this is a picture that was taken in South Texas. You can see the Texas on her t-shirt. Many of the women very much believe that engaging in social activism itself is a healing process. And again, you go through this process of you figure out what are my struggles and what are the things that help me get through those, and what's my community and how are other people struggling with this. That as you go through that process, that in itself is healing. And so what we have here then is a very different way of thinking about social activism. As one of the women said, having a voice brings the power that carries women and transform them. Gaining a voice is healing. And so these women learn how to tell their stories. For some women, at first it feels a little awkward, like you want me to talk about myself? What, okay. But in the end, like they're very accomplished at telling their life stories. They gain knowledge and skills. So they learn, know your rights, your legal rights, for example, or how does Zika happen in our community? Or how can you get an identification card from the Mexican consulate? Things that are really practical and really helpful. They also learn how to analyze social problems and propose remedies. And they learn that their own experience is a legitimate basis for proposing these remedies. So they learn that I have the right to access healthcare. It's not fair that I can't go to the clinic when I need to have my annual exam or when I get pregnant. And so it very much shifts how they think about themselves. They learn to write their stories, and some of these women write in Spanish because they're not English speakers, and that's fine. These are bilingual meetings, actually, maybe Spanish speaking meetings. And they learn to speak publicly. So the human rights hearings that I talked about, those were all women from these communities who gave their testimonials in Spanish to a public audience. And they were scared and it was hard and they practiced, but yet you would have never known. They were so incredibly poised. They learn to have the right to lobby. So some of these women will go to their state legislators and tell their stories to lobbyists and ask for different kinds of legislation. They learn to have the right to protest. One of the things I learned is in South Texas, there aren't a lot of demonstrations apparently. And the reproductive justice advocates taught them, when you have a good demonstration, there are actually 10 roles. Somebody's on security and somebody's organizing the technology and logistics, and somebody's the cheerleader who yells out the chants and everybody follows. It was a learning process for me, and I've been to many a demonstration. But these women learn not only that they have the right to protest, but there's a skilled way to do it. And then finally, they have a liberatory imaginary. Like they're always asked, like, what would you like to see happen in this community? What would make this a better place to live? And so they start talking about, well, I'd love my kids to get an education, or it'd be great if my partner had, a job where I didn't have to work so I could take care of my children. All these different kinds of things, some of which are very, very, far-reaching. So while you are struggling, you are healing. I'm going to end with these images on the left. This was taken after the Whole Woman v. Hellerstedt Supreme Court legislation that struck down Texas anti-abortion legislation. Of course, Texas passed some more since then. But you can see men and women, men wearing shirts that say "Soy Poderosa," and they value the health, dignity, and justice that the reproductive justice movement advocates for. This is an image taken in South Texas, and as you can see, it's multi-generational. So people bring their kids, and we have grandmothers there, and they are constantly trying to figure out what's our next step. And so I think it really sort of suggests that this isn't just a movement for women. This is a movement for everyone. Everyone is invited, and we're working on behalf of reproductive justice. And if we were to get reproductive justice, that would mean a better world for all of us. I'm going to open it up to questions, but if anyone wants to read further about this, these are some suggested readings that have really taught me a lot. One of the great things about being retired is I get to do a lot more reading. So Inflamed Systemic Injustice literally maps itself directly onto our bodies. Very interesting analysis. Actually, this is a book my son gave me. See No Stranger, where she argues that wonder is the root of love, that when we wonder about nature or children or babies or whatever, that deep solidarity is rooted in love, and love is sweet labor. That is, we continually work on behalf of love. Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Really lovely book. by a woman who's a biologist, a scientist, and she's Native American. And she tries to put those two epistemologies together. And she suggests if we reclaim attention to the natural world and take steps to nurture it, then joy and healing begins and a revolution starts. And then finally, Anand Girihadbaras book, The Persuaders, at the front lines for winning hearts and minds. And he went out and interviewed a bunch of activists, and including Loretta Ross, who's a reproductive justice advocate, including AOC. And he asked them, how do you persuade people who are totally against what you're trying to do? And each one has a different process, but the summation was paint the beautiful tomorrow, like convince people that something will be better if we all organize together. So I'm going to stop there. We have time for questions or comments. Thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll use this microphone for questions because it's a hybrid event and folks need to hear you on Zoom as well. So we'll just try to project your voice in the room so folks in the room can hear you as well. Well, let me start by firstly thanking Professor. This is such an honor for us to just host you at DVC, and I think your message is exactly what we needed at this time in the semester. Like, we're hitting the mid semester point, and we needed your energy and all the positive things you said, empowering us, you know, because being a woman myself and the mom of a 16-year-old daughter, it's scary times, it's really disheartening times, and just to hear that so many folks are engaged in doing something about it and not feeling helpless is exactly what we needed to hear. So I'm gonna ask folks to start us off with questions. Yes, at the back. Sure.
Hi, my name's Sirena Saldivar. Thank you for presenting. I honestly loved your presentation, and I, you know, as a woman in like, I sorry, I forgot your name. Niyogi, Miss Niyogi. Yeah, it's really hard times, and there's a lot of like oppressive ideologies out there, and so it's nice to kind of get like a refreshing, empowering presentation. But I did have a question. I wanted to know what you suggest is the best way to inform older generations who have normalized oppressive ideologies about reproductive rights, and like how to go forward with that. Just because I know for me, I'm really close to my grandma, but because of religion and just her generation, she has a very construed like ideas about women's bodies. And how would I go forward with like, I guess, informing her and like educating her, but like in a kind way, of course.
That's a really good question. And I'll begin by saying that was my grandmother too. I'm a deep Catholic, very traditional. You know, you stick by the, you know, the norms, you try to be a good person. I think I would start with love, actually. And that's one of the things that Valerie Kaur suggests, is that, you know, really when you're feeling a lot of despair, or, you know, you're throwing your hands up, you're very frustrated, like, what grounds you in relation to people you care about? It's love. And so try to have some compassion for people that you disagree with, and try to understand the kinds of things that they're saying. And she did this amazing experiment with someone who had sexually abused her. And she, you know, after years of being, you know, traumatized and sought therapy, she tried to think, where did that come from? How could that happen? And she went through this process of trying to understand the pain and the fear that this person was experiencing. I'm not saying your grandmother is abusive, but I am saying that when people hang on to these ideas, there's something they're trying to protect. So trying to understand what is that, and trying to understand that with compassion, and then very gently and lovingly ask them to think about, well, what happened when something happened? Or what did you do when this happened? And try to draw them out. And one of the things that happens when you have the honor and the respect to do that is when people can let go of their fears and their anger, there's often a lot of pain there. There's often horrible things that have happened. And that's the beginning of a conversation that can lead you someplace else. You may not change your grandmother completely. I'm not sure I could have ever changed mine. But, you know, she loved me and I loved her. And in that love, I think there was a space for us to try to figure out how can we be together, even if we understand that we're not going to agree on everything.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Vanessa Franco. Okay. You are very inspiring, and because of that, I just would like to know who inspires you. Who are some of your role models?
That's such a great question. That was actually one of the questions that at the Leadership Institute, we had a breakout session. We had to talk about people who inspire us. And I was like, there's so many. The first one who came to mind was Sonia Sotomayor, who is this amazing person. But, you know, I was part of a project where we all told our life stories, our testimonials, and we were asked, what is your genealogy of empowerment? That is, who were the role models that helped you find your path? And it was my mother and my grandmother. Absolutely. And yeah, I didn't agree with my grandmother in the meeting, or my mother, actually. That's it. She was kind of conservative. But they loved me and they supported me and they were proud of me. And they taught me, you know, like you don't have to take stuff when people are mean to you. And you have the right to, you know, be good in school and to be recognized for that. Like, what is your genealogy of empowerment? I think we all have them. And sometimes it's a teacher, it's a mentor. Sometimes it's our relatives, whoever that is. I will say I was really fortunate throughout my educational career. At every step, there was a mentor. In high school, you know, I got that 4-year scholarship. I couldn't imagine going to college for 4 years. I needed to get a job. I came from a low-income family. And I had a high school teacher, and he hired me as a research assistant, and he would ask me, like, what do you think of these findings? It was like, you know, why do young people drop out of school? And it turned out smoking was a real predictor of who was going to drop out of school. And he was like, why is that? So I was like, well, what about this and this? And he was like, you're really sharp. Have you thought about going on and becoming a researcher? Hey, that had never occurred to me. So that along the way, there are going to be people who say something to you. And sometimes those mentors are your friends. When I went to graduate school, didn't have good mentors. In fact, I had bad mentors, if I'm honest. But my friends, you know, we were all like trying to figure out, like, how do we do this? And, you know, what does it take to finish your degree and, you know, publish and get a job? And those were my role models. And, you know, now we're all elders and, you know, people are directing programs and professors and doing things. But at the time, you know, we were first gen, working class Latinas and Latinos trying to figure it out. So there are lots of mentors in our lives. And I think it's really important to recognize and to realize what we get from different mentors.
Other questions? Yes.
Earlier in class, you had mentioned the process of writing a book and all the steps you went into. That you said you do all the research, you gather everything up, and you said that the most recent book was inspired by an email, right? And
Yes.
so I was wondering, you know, because a hard part for us students sometimes is starting an essay. So I'm wondering, how do you put all of that passion into actually beginning and like transmuting it and like kind of translating it into the sense of the book?
That's a really great question. So first of all, I want to disclose, in high school, I always got mixed responses to my writing skills. I was always told, well, you need to work on your writing, but when you're passionate about something, then you do a really good job. And I was like, well, what does that tell you? You know, like I wasn't passionate about a lot of the things I was being taught. So what are your passions and how can you honor that? One of the things writing is a skill, and just like any skill, it takes practice. And so one of the things I have learned over the years is when I'm feeling overwhelmed and like, I don't know how I'm gonna do this, I write my little outline, but then I never really stick to it completely, is journaling. Like I write in my journal, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I don't know how I'm gonna do this and I have to do X, Y, and Z, and I list all the things I have to do. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's do number one. Check, and then I go on. And sometimes it's all about writing about, imposter syndrome is real, particularly for those of us who first gen, like we weren't supposed to be here. I can't tell you the number of times as a professor, I was the only person of color and the only woman in the room. And so you're like, you have to educate them about, people of color in general. They're like, really? Like, how does that work? It's frustrating. But really, it's all about, how do I ground myself? And for me, that's writing. Write my journal, and I'm, not feeling it. I'm feeling weak. I'm feeling, unsure. But there's something about putting it on paper that it takes away the power. And then you figure out, okay, here's what I'm going to do next. Writing a book is a long, hard process, and I'm definitely a perfectionist. And so now I go back and I read, and I was like, oops, that word, I should have changed that word. But, what are you going to do? But I think we all find our own process. And one of the things that I used to advise my graduate students to do is to talk to people, interview people who are writers and ask them what their strategies are, and then interview yourself. And it turns out, like one of my former students, she couldn't write a word until she cleaned her entire house. I think that's weird. Like that is not me. I could write in a big old mess, but that's her process. My friend who's part Chicana, part Native American, she can't write a word until she lights a candle and honors the four directions. Whatever it is, that's your process. And when you ground yourself in your process, it'll come little by little.
I really appreciate your entire talk, and especially when it comes to teaching us as men who are either feminists or not feminists, and just helping us become more versed and knowledge in your guys' struggles as sisters. I also appreciate you giving birth to my mentor over there. But I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to answer because it is a personal spiritual journey, but have you ever been to Temescal or Sweat Lodge in general?
We had a version of a Sweat Lodge when we put the Telling to Live project together. We all gave our testimonials. We met in Baca, Colorado, which is for Indigenous people, a place of emergence for the Navajo. And there were, we did a sort of a mini Sweat Lodge there. And there was a lot of sharing, like we were all raised, some of us are raised Jewish, most of us are raised Catholic. Like, how do you let go of Catholicism? That's a big project in itself. And how do you, some women were queer, like how do you come out to your family? Be out in the world. Like all of us had struggles. And so I think there was a version of that happening there. But I very much honor those kinds of practices. I had a health issue a few years ago. And after I got through it, I had surgery on my spine. So it was big. And afterwards, I met with an indigenous healer from Bali, who is one of my fellow yogis, and he does ceremonies, and he did a cleansing. And one of the things he said, I'm going to get emotional again. He said he had an image of a person. And I was like, really? Like what? And he said it was my mother, and she approves. And it just floored me. So there's something real. And it's so odd that we don't value other systems of knowledge. Because I felt cleansed. I felt like I was on the pathway to healing. And I felt honored. And it was just so important that my mother was part of that. Thank you. This is going to be so emotional for me.
Which way? Just hold it. Okay. I Yeah, this is more of a comment than a question, but I think like you talked about tactics, and I think like it's great to go talk to your congressperson, but at the end of the day, they're owned by the capitalist class, so they don't really care what you really say. And I think, you know, it's much more effective to be engaged in direct action and building dual power than wasting your time with people who don't really care about you individually. Um, you know, like I think what is much probably would be more effective during these times is more militant things like what the Janes did by providing illegal abortions and like smuggling abortion drugs across borders if you're able to get it. Um, yeah, I think that, you know, if we're gonna build a non-hierarchical society without, you know, sexism, racism, all that stuff, I think that it's much more important to have your means and your ends tied together.
So I actually really agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I think one of the things that I like about this movement is that there are plenty of protests and women meeting and sharing their stories and those kinds of things. And they very much support the kind of work that James were doing, that literally providing access to abortion services. But I don't want to give the world to white capitalists. You know, like I also believe very much in policy advocacy, like the right to vote should be sacred. And so I want our people in those rooms pushing for those kinds of rights. So I guess what I'm saying is there are different kinds of power and we all find where we want to work.
We have time for a couple of more questions if folks have. And I want to also. Oh, yeah, of course. Would you like? Oh, great. So we do have a student leader from our social justice club, and we would love to hear about the club.
Hi, yes. I'm part of the Social Justice Club. It meets from 4:30 to 5:30 in LC 101. We do discussions about LGBTQ rights, cultural appropriation, and such topics. We have collabed with other clubs as well, like KKDVC and Alpha Gamma Sigma and such clubs, and the PSA Pride Student Alliance Club. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. So if you want to find out more, you can reach out to Professor Juan here as well, because he is a mentor for the club. Do we have any more questions for Professor Zavella? So as a teacher and scholar myself, I was very curious about your process. So I know that in the academy, we are conditioned to have our researcher hat on, and clearly we could see all the passion you have for this work. This is your life's work. And I was curious about how you wear those multiple hats of being researcher, but also being an activist in the movement. So while you're studying the folks in the movement, and whether you ever find that those are contradictory positions to hold.
I don't think they're contradictory because from my point of view, teaching is activism. Getting people to think critically is important social transformation. And I feel like that was one of the pieces of my activism. I always feel like this project sort of helped me to see more explicitly how activism and scholarship go together. And one of the things I learned from the movement is, you know, initially I was going to write an article with one of the activists, and then she couldn't do it because she just had too many deadlines. And she sat me down and she said, it's actually better if you write about us in academic venues. Like, you know, we're writing our press releases and, you know, we're magazine art, you know, we're doing our thing, but academia doesn't know about us, like write about us. And so my book and the articles that I've written, I feel like that's part of my activism. And it's really rewarding to me because I actually really like research and writing. This is my passion. And when people, like people read my book, sometimes my students will come and they said, I showed my mom your book and she was so excited that somebody's written about this. That is so heartwarming. So in many ways, I think there are lots of roles to play. There are lots of different kinds of activism. And once you get tenure in academia, that's a whole different process. So I would encourage everyone, what is your passion and how can you be the kind of activist you want to be in the work that you want to do? It's been a real pleasure talking to you all. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Zavella. We do ask you to provide feedback for us. So Christina and Lindsay will hand out the hard copies of the survey here. So if you're here, please do fill that out. And for folks online, if you could please answer the survey on the link there, right? So thanks again. And we do have one last equity speaker this semester in April. We will keep you posted about that. It's always wonderful to engage with you all in community. So hope to see you back. All right. Enjoy your week.
Amazing. I would love a picture.